It uses big data, artificial intelligence to hook women up with other women and the needs that they have around, I need capital access. I need to understand, legal capabilities. I want marketing skills that will help me figure out how to market my company. And through this platform, we have thousands of women that are interacting with other women that they can connect real time with. And through technology and big data, this platform continues to be smarter and smarter and smarter. And our goal is to enable millions of women that can get the access to the skills, the training, and everything that Cherie and her foundation are helping to enable. So I think technology can really, really help there.
Technology, practical solutions, sacrifices, and the wonderful work that your foundation is doing. My compliments. Let me turn back to Ivanka. Ivanka, a McKinsey Global Institute study shows that if we are able to close this workforce gap by 12%, we would actually be increasing the world's GDP by 25% by 2025. And it also, another interesting fact that this throws up, women in top leadership positions and boards actually enjoy greater financial returns. So was that a conscious choice to run your entire enterprise, Ivanka Trump, with all women leadership and completely run by women? Was that for the bottom line? Was that to make sure that you have more women in the right positions, or how do you go about doing this?
Well, I think today, empirically, we know that having equal representation, gender representation, having diversity is a positive. It's financially beneficial to business. And that's what's pushing corporations, not just a social responsibility, but a fiscal responsibility to their shareholders. And that's what's pushing businesses to diversify at a faster rate than if they were doing it for some other motivation. So that's exciting. And we're seeing all the studies, we're seeing all the data to support that very fact. So I think the key, and we've covered so much ground here. We've talked about the importance of public policy supporting working families, women and men who work inside or outside of the home. We've talked about the role of technology and how that can connect people to mentoring opportunities, like the great work being done at Dell. We're doing that domestically at the government through programs such as SCORE, which have been very, very successful in getting private sector and getting successful men and women to coach and to mentor other young people or not so young people, who want to become CEOs as well. So taking programs like SCORE. We've talked about inadequate access to capital, which happens domestically, unfortunately, as well. When you look at our participation or our share of venture capital funding is minuscule, 3% last year. We're trying to fix that by A, raising awareness about this issue, but B, increasing our lending through the Small Business Administration. In 2017, we increased the amount of lending to women-led firms by over $500 million year-to-date alone, so that's exciting. And then internationally, where the barriers are the same but far greater, oftentimes with a cultural or legal overlay that makes it particularly challenging. So one of the initiatives we launched, and there's so many great initiatives across government. I'm leaving this stage and going to the State Department run GIST competition, which maybe some of the entrepreneurs here today will be participating in. You will? Amazing. It's a pitch competition to support investment in great entrepreneurs around the globe doing very innovative things. But there's so many different programs. But this summer we launched something that was very extraordinary. We were founding members with 14 other countries of a World Bank initiative called Wi-Fi, and it seeks to address a number of the things we've mentioned: access to capital, access to networks, access to mentorship, and access to equitable laws by pushing governments in developing worlds to lower barriers and change the laws that prohibit women from full participation in their economies. So WeFi is very exciting, and we anticipate being able to leverage in excess of $1 billion to go to female entrepreneurs in the developing world. So we're hopeful that has a profound effect on the ecosystem of women's entrepreneurship generally, but also for the benefit of women in the workforce as well. Because it was noted here that when you invest in women, they invest back into their families, back into their communities. They say 90 cents on the dollar earned by a woman goes right back into her family and community, and back into things like education, into healthcare, into things that will create a positive generational impact. So we're very excited about that initiative, and all the other ways we can fuel the exciting work that's being done in the entrepreneurship ecosystem at home and abroad.
Congratulations.
Can I ask you, because
Absolutely.
Ivanka, that 90 cent figure is a very interesting one, but I want to ask you as a man, what do you think the equivalent figure is for a man?
40?
Well,
He was supposed to answer that.
I'm the moderator. I'm supposed to be asking you questions. So. Anyways, I think it must be around 40.
Yeah, no, it's 30.
30.
30.
All right. As always, women are the smarter ones anyways.
40. But you know what I think?
I was trying to
But do you know what I think about that? You see, I think there are plenty of men who also invest 90% of their efforts into their family and into their community. And the problem is that there are some men, my own father was one of these men, because he abandoned my mother and my sister and myself and never supported us ever again. Who'd only put 1%, if you're lucky, into their families. And the question really is for men is, why is it that we tolerate the idea that these men who go off and spend their lives on wine, women and song, somehow that's acceptable? The men who put 90% of their efforts into their families should be speaking out more loudly and saying, these men that don't do that actually are letting us all down, rather than just shrugging their shoulders and saying, oh, well, women, they do 90%, we do 30 to 40 as men, but that's okay. Because actually, it isn't really okay, is it?
It's true, and I think this is something, Cherie, that I'm glad you brought up, but I'm actually very optimistic about, because I see the landscape changing, and especially when you look at the next generation coming up. I think women don't view themselves as purely providing care for their families. They want to work. In many cases, they need to work to support their families. Men, similarly, are taking a much more active approach in raising children and participating in the family than in previous generations as well. And we see this happening on different scales, but all over the world. And I see this generational shift that is very exciting, because when you think about true equality, it starts with having this level playing field and sharing the responsibilities, domestic responsibilities, as well as workplace responsibilities much more equitably. So I love the natural shift that we have happening, but I think talking about these issues, and I think men talking about the fact that they're not financial providers alone, that they want to participate, that they want to be involved parents and fathers is incredibly important as well.
Now that you raised a very personal question, let me throw a quick question to all of you. I've learned that all of you are privileged to have a daughter, also each of you. I have an 8-year-old daughter also. So what would you say is the single most important thing that you would like to see changed? We talked about multiple things. We talked about capacity, we talked about confidence, we talked about mentorship, we talked about collaboration with the private sector, we talked about rural sector. What is that one single important thing from a government and from the societal perspective that you would like to see differently, say, a decade from now? We'll start with you, Ivanka, and then we'll move on to others. We have about 5 minutes, so let's make this crisp.
Well, I think I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I'm actually trying to get rid of some of her confidence. But I think the purity of a young girl and the lack of assumption around what her role is, what she should do, what she shouldn't do, what she should like, what she shouldn't like, the longer we can preserve that, the better. So I'm always inspired by my daughter because she makes me realize how many ingrained biases even I have that I don't realize that I'm accidentally putting on one of my children, my sons or my daughters. So I think look at our smallest children and see the world as much like they see it as humanly possible. And hopefully Arabella grows up in a world where she's never told she can't do something because of her gender. Certainly, she'll never be told that by her mother.
Fantastic. A big round of applause, please. Ingrained bias, which is even within all of us. Tell me about it. I'm a man, so I'm obviously going to have a little bit more of that. Chanda, a quick point on what you would like to see differently a decade from now, the single most important thing.
Well, as you said, we all have daughters. I have a daughter, and I think the proudest thing for me to say is that while today here I'm sitting as a panel member, my daughter's sitting here in her own right as a woman entrepreneur,
Can we
as
have
a
her stand
delegate
up
here.
please? Miss Kochhar's daughter.
There she is.
A big round of applause to the young lady. What's her name?
Inspiration, because I think at her age, I expected my mother to do so many more things for me than what she expects her mother to do, because she doesn't find the mother around.
She's a strong young lady.
So, yes, so much around. So I think it is about, this is an entrepreneurship summit, so I would say it is about 3 E's for women: education, encouragement, and empowerment.
Education, encouragement, and empowerment. Big round of applause.
If we do that, I think sky's the limit for all women.
Fantastic. Cherie, your thoughts on what the single most important thing is that you'd like to see differently a decade from now?
Well, I've got a daughter, I've also got 3 sons, and if you were to ask me, what's the most important thing for my daughter, I think the most important thing is actually to marry well. And if you
choose the right partner.
Choose the right partner. And therefore, when I talk about what I want to see for my daughter, I actually think more about my sons, because as a mother of 3 sons and 1 daughter, I have to actually think, how am I bringing up my sons? And for a long time, my main concern was that one day my boys would come to me and say, "Mum, here's my girl that I'm going to marry, and I want to let you know that she's going to stay at home and look after me." Fortunately, that hasn't happened. My youngest is only 17, so if you get back in your career so that her career can flourish. Because if you constantly think that yes, she can have a career, but it's always secondary to mine, then it's never going to quite work, is it? Because the girl will always then have to take the
Since you mentioned choosing the right partner, one of these days when I'm going to catch the Prime Minister, I'm going to talk to him about his perspective as well on choosing the right partner.
Can you also mention to him when is the time when he's going to take a step back in his career so that I can get on with mine?
Absolutely, I shall ask him that.
I do think, though, and I just want to layer something on top of that, because I do think you're right, that conversation needs to be happening about who's going to step back if somebody is going to step back. But I do think we have to do a better job of recognizing that all women are working women, whether they're working inside the home, raising their families, or whether they're working in a professional capacity. And I think we have to celebrate that decision either way, but we need to create an environment in which people can make the decisions that are right for their family. So destigmatizing men making the choice to do that, but also not disincentivizing or not frustrating women who choose that as the right path for themselves as well.
Well, we're actually out of time, but
I want to say one thing.
No, absolutely. In fact, all I was going to say
what
is,
needs to change? I think we need to see more women and girls in STEM-related roles, whether they are entrepreneurs that are creating innovative technology, big data, all of that, or whether it's girls that are graduating with STEM-related degrees. The numbers are really scary, and that is where the jobs are going to be. The salaries are going to be higher, the job security is going to be greater, technology is permeating everything, and what I would love to see is a much more balanced set of graduates and women that are in STEM-related fields, because it's going to be a huge business imperative for many, many companies and governments around the world.
Well, while we are out of time, I think I have some very powerful women in the world sitting on this podium, so I'm going to take my liberties. I'm going to ask the organizers to give us 2 more minutes, and then we'll close out some final thoughts. Chanda, on what do you think, again, on skills, training, capacity? We covered multiple issues. Final thoughts, closing remarks on what we should be doing, say 60 seconds?
Yeah, so I said that, you know, education in terms of in empowerment, you actually cover everything, whether it's skill, access to credit, and, you know, all that. And in terms of encouragement, it's the social approach towards women. But I want to take 1 minute to talk about India, because this is a forum where I think we should talk about India. And I just want to say that, you know, for India, this is today a matter of both celebration, because India has come a long way, as well as a matter of resolving that there is lots more to do. So, you know, clearly as Cherie said that, you know, not even 25% of the graduated women really participate in the workforce, and therefore the same McKinsey study says that for India, actually we can add in the next 8 to 10 years $700 billion to our own GDP if we actually bridge this gender gap. But the way I look at it is that I think this is a glass half full, because that is what is the potential for India and India's GDP. But while we have a lot to do, I think I just want to tell this forum that I think India still does much better than many, many other countries in the world. And let me take, you know, it's a wide spectrum. I mean, you do not have a country where you have 100 million families impacted by the self-help group movement, of which 85% of that self-help group people are women.
Out of which 20 million are in Telangana.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So you move from there to the whole entrepreneurship thing. And, you know, I think India's economic structure is changing. It's no longer just a manufacturing or a services economy. It's now becoming an entrepreneurship economy, an economy of value chains, which gives women more and more enablement to create their own niche and to start their own careers. And what bigger testimony than to say that in India we are able to put up a platform where more than 50% participants are women today, sitting right here.
Fantastic. Big round of applause to the ladies, the women entrepreneurs who showed up at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit.
And then let me take this little further to say that it's India that has produced, you know, sports women in fields that get us medals and, you know, things like wrestling and gymnastics, which were so far, you know, typified as being men's sports. Today, India has women fighter pilots in the Indian Air Force. Today, it's Indian Navy that has started an all-woman circumnavigation around the world, you know, just as an expedition. Today, India has a defense minister who's a lady. Today, India has, you know, senior ministers who are ladies, and there is no country in the world where 40% of the banking sector is headed by women.
Lovely. That was a great note, great closing note from a banker. Ivanka?
First of all, I appreciate the discussion and all the panelists for just a really great dialogue that happened here today. But I do want to follow up on something that Karen was talking about as it relates to STEM education particularly. Because when you think about the landscape in the developed world, where there has been better access to capital certainly than in the developing world, and more progressive policies to support working families, in some cases better than others. But there has been a stagnation in terms of closing that gender wage gap. And it's really sort of persisted and stayed, it closed, and then flatlined over a decade ago, and it stayed that way. And when you really break down the reason for that and what's causing that, it's women traditionally have in fields, and when you look at industry, have a lack of participation of women in higher growth fields like STEM fields, in computer science fields. And you also have an unfortunate circumstance where traditionally women dominated sectors of the economy are undervalued financially. and are underpaid financially. So I think both need to be disrupted. We need to get more men into so-called women's fields, and we need to get more women into STEM fields where our participation rates are really abysmal. I'm incredibly fearful that when you look out and you think about where the future of work is going, that if women continue to represent only 13% of engineers in the United States, or continue to represent only 24% of computer science professionals, that the gender wage gap